Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right, welcome guys to Asking Why podcast with Clint Davis, and I have Luke Smallbone with me right now from For King and Country, and so we're going to talk about their new album. As you guys know, we try to reach out to people in the community that have stories that combine mental health and theology, people who are Christians who are on the journey like many of us to just be healthy, but to also live on mission, and I think they do that well as a band. We were talking before we went live, but I thank you so much for coming on here and giving us your time and your testimony and your story. So I really appreciate you coming and being with us.
Man, no worries. Pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. So I kind of got onto you guys, listening to your music. I was talking about my cousin Lindsay being part of the wife of the band members and stuff like that. And so I'd heard of y'all through them and started listening to your stuff. I can't remember what record it was. I think I have it written down. Run Wild, Live Free. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I had went to New York to do this training for sex addiction and trauma. And man, I just listened to that album on repeat. And it was just, so I have all these memories of being in New York and traveling through the city for the first time and going on the subway. And I just had you in my ear, went to see the dinosaur exhibits and all that stuff. And anyway, so I just had this love for that album especially. And then about 2 years ago, I guess longer than that, I was working with human trafficking, and then you guys put out the movie, remind me.
Priceless.
Yeah, Priceless.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And so I went and did a couple of panels, like people would play the movie at local theaters, and then they have us come on because we work with human trafficking. And so that was another connection. And then about 2 years ago, I kind of hit a wall in my own life with working with trauma, and I had to do some heavy work again in my own life. And Burn the Ships had come out, and it was just playing over and over, and it was just such a beautiful kind of tie-in for me. So I just wanted you to know, like, I am so thankful for the ministry you have in your music, what you put out, the context of what you guys are doing, because just for me personally, your band, your music, your lyrics have been super, super helpful. So I hope that today, for other people that listen, I know I'm not just the only one, they get some stuff out of it. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Well, I'm so glad that our music can be the soundtrack to your dinosaur exhibit excursion in New York City, man. That's funny and fun all at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about the new album. I know it's coming out March 11th. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, March 11th. Yeah, man. It's the first new project, and I think it's been over 3 years now, which is crazy to think through. But yeah, it's called What Are We Waiting For? And, it's one of the first projects that we've actually made while being, for the most part, at home. The pandemic forced a lot of us home, which was actually, obviously everybody walking through the pandemic has had very different experiences. Yeah. But for us, it was a little bit of a gift just to be home a little bit more than what we had been. And so we went into the studio and really spent about 6 months just exclusively, for the most part, we didn't have anything else to do, and just making music. And most of the other projects have been in the middle of being on the road and kind of going through, walking off a stage back, then running into the back of the bus to write more songs. And so this gave us probably the most amount of time we've ever had to actually work on the project. And so Relate was the first single from that project, new song. now just kind of coming out is a song called "For God Is With Us," and
that's a good one.
We're thrilled to be able to. I mean, look, music is a gift, and not everybody gets the opportunity to make music, and we're thankful for that. Thankful for the time. The album. Some people have been like, "Oh, so if you wrote it during the pandemic, is it like a pandemic album?" And I said, "No, not at all." But I do think we all learned a lot of valuable lessons from the pandemic, and lessons that we actually want to take with us into normalcy if we ever get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this album actually really is about. It's like, man, some of these lessons that were learned were ones that we want to take with us. We don't want to forget. And this album is written about a lot of those experiences.
Yeah, you guys have a particular voice when it comes to, like we talked about with Priceless, with the other albums. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how it relates to mental health and spiritual health and these things, and how you guys bring that into the songs?
Yeah, well, Len, I think that, in the past, the church and arts actually in particular were a part of tackling the most difficult issues. And, I've often joked that, music has a little bit of a way of making the medicine go down a little bit smoother.
Absolutely.
And because you can paint it how you want, because, you can have a melody that's catchy. You can have, you could use different paintbrushes, if that makes sense. Where when a pastor, this is not picking on pastors, but when a pastor is speaking from the pulpit,
we pick on pastors all the time.
Well, yeah, there's only so much that they, when they're speaking with authority on something, which a lot of times they are, you don't know how the person is receiving it because of maybe past traumas for a lot of the past things that have happened. And with music, you can curate how someone feels, and you can actually set a little bit of a bed. And so I think for us, when it does come to Priceless and some of these more difficult issues, God only knows, with mental health, all of the varying things that we've chatted about over the course of the years, it's actually because we feel the need to be people that are actually talking about the hard issues. I think when the church is doing their job appropriately, they're actually taking any issue that comes up. The next week they're kind of speaking about it. I think we do ourselves a disservice when it's, hey, this is too difficult. I may lose membership. I may. There may be a financial implication if I come out and talk about these things. I think that's a mistake, because I think that otherwise people are going to go somewhere else for their information. People are going to go somewhere else for their viewpoint. We forget that a lot of times we don't have individual viewpoints. We just read about somebody else's and we decide to take that for ourselves. And so,
especially in this culture.
Yeah, and so my hope is that, I'm not saying that I've got the answers, but I do hope that with music you can start talking about some of these, slightly difficult issues, and you're creating some conversation so that people can come up with their, hopefully, truth in their conclusions of what is taking place and their viewpoint on things.
Yeah, it's so good, man. Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation we're having here every day with different pastors and different churches, and trying to get, the kind of American Christianity, that angle of butts in the seat and people there, and you don't want to preach anything or say anything that's going to make people uncomfortable or upset them or get them to go away. When in reality, I think it's quite the opposite, that we should be challenging each other and digging into these truths and making them practical. And so I love that you guys do that. And I think you're right. I think music gives us a connection into our souls and into our hearts. I mean, I know worship isn't the only form of music, but it's certainly a very strong one. And so, I'm sure you know this, but for our listeners, music and smell are tied closely together with memories and important things. And so many of us can listen to an album. I was laughing with some friends because, I was a big hip hop fan back in the day, and still sort of am. Trying to move over to more Lecrae and Andy Mineo and NF and more Christian artists, but there's still a lot of Eminem and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. So for the Super Bowl, right, they came out.
You were having a great time.
Oh, it was just so nostalgic, right? I mean, as they came out, whether I agree with those lyrics and obviously not celebrating those things, but just that time period in my life when I was young and in high school and stupid and didn't know what any of that meant anyway. But it was, I just remembered parties and friends and trips and, trips to the beach, and that was kind of the music playing. And so it wasn't that music is what I want to support or, think is great as far as content. But man, the nostalgia of that and just the throwback to that brings us back to all kinds of things. And
that's right.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I heard lose yourself come on, and like I'm not endorsing that, but
Yeah, you lost yourself,
man, it's
right?
that is a riff that is difficult to forget.
Absolutely. How old are you, Luke?
I'm 35 now.
Okay, yeah.
35.
So you
Yeah.
graduated what, 2004 or 5?
Yeah. I
Okay.
don't even remember.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because 8 Mile came
Yep.
out somewhere right in that little
That's right.
season. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
It's crazy, man. Well, tell me a little bit about Relate specifically and kind of how that song developed, and tell people about that if they haven't heard it, and how you made meaning out of that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we were in the middle of kind of the pandemic, and it was interesting even just reflecting back on 2020. I think that for most of us realized the fall of that 2020. Okay, this is going to be a difficult year, and I think we thought we were going to come into 2021, and in some cases, just that calendar year change was going to miraculously change everything. And it's been interesting talking to different people. And obviously, I'm not no special, I don't specialize in the world that you come from. But I think in some cases, 2021 was actually more difficult for people than 2020. I think that we all kind of had this, we're in this together in 2020. We're going to figure it out. And then it kind of became normal, just the suffering and the difficulty. And then we started to fray as a society. Then we started to kind of pick sides, and it just got a little bit more hostile, and in some cases rightfully so, because
Right.
a lot of us don't know what to do with the angst that we feel in life. And when I say rightfully so, I understand it doesn't necessarily mean some of our actions and the things that came from it is something that is healthy or good, but it makes sense as to why some of these things happen. And I think what we found is we were at the first quarter of 2021, and I came into a writing session just with this idea of what does it look like to have compassion for someone today? What does it look like to have empathy for someone that may not have walked through life the same way that I've walked through life? Because what I was finding a lot of is people online on Facebook and Instagram were saying very, very hurtful things to people that they actually love because of a simple disagreement over fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And I saw some like people saying, "Hey, I've been a friend of yours for 15 years, but I just cannot accept that you would say this." And I was just sitting there going, over an issue that, yes, there's consequences to all these things and there's disagreements, but really? And that's the way you're going to tell them that essentially you're breaking up with them over 15 years? It's just, so anyway, I started to realize that a lot of times when these people are saying either very, very hurtful things, or people are saying very, very hurtful things at someone, it's because of their own pain. It's because of their own trauma. It's because of their own things that they've walked through. And so I started to ask the question of, so what does it look like to actually, show empathy to that person who maybe I posted something and somebody said something really, really harsh, and I want to get back on and go, how dare you, X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. What if I actually could come to the conclusion that, that person said that because they're just hurting and they don't know what to do with the feelings and the thoughts and the pain that they have in their life. And so I often liken it to this, when I've got 4 kids, and when you've got a young kid who's 3 years old or so, and they lose that precious toy that they have, when they come to you and they're like, I don't know where it is, or it's been destroyed, it's been ripped apart, or somebody took it, or I left it. There's this, usually there's tears in their eye and they're crushed beyond no measure. And as a parent, you go, man, I'll just go get you another one. It was $4 at the, Big Lots, or whatever. But what we forget is that in that moment, that pain is real to that child. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's about the toy or not. That pain is real. And so what I realized was, well, I've been hurt like that before. And in some cases, other people could come into their global, the kind that's overseeing everything and go, Luke, it's really not that big of a deal. I could just go get you another. But that doesn't actually calm my spirit.
Yeah,
that doesn't actually help. That doesn't actually help very much. And so for me, I realized I'm a little bit like that little child who at times has lost that precious thing. And I've got other people coming at me saying, hey, just get over it. It'll be okay. And yet when I realize that I've been hurt the same way that little child is, it gives me compassion for that child. It gives me empathy for that child. It may not be over the exact same situation. It may not be about the same issue. But man, when I know what it looks like to look into another's eyes and see pain, and that I'm trying to say, well, what if that can give me a little bit of compassion for another one when I see that pain in somebody else's eyes. And that's essentially what Relate is all about.
Yeah, man, that's a beautiful way to explain it. Obviously I know, I didn't know the backstory, but in the way you write, and one of the lyrics I love is, have you ever been left when you should have been loved? Has there ever been a time when you stayed, but you should have run? And as a clinician, those are polarizing comments, right? One is somebody abandoning you, and one, you're staying in a relationship that's super toxic when you should have gotten out of there. And all of us have, and you're right, that pain. It's funny you say, you're not trained or whatever, but it's like the stuff that we do as clinicians, and I think as Christian counselors especially, right? It's just simple biblical truths and discipleship and true relationships and relating to people. And you have to have accepted grace and received grace and done some personal work and trauma recovery yourself as a clinician to be any good at what you do. Because if you can give information, or you can be present and be in relationship. And so when it comes from pain, you're so right. And I want people to, understand that when you're in pain, right, it's coming from really two core places. One is a violation of love, right? Am I worthy? Am I valuable? Am I known? Am I seen? And one is a violation of safety. Am I safe? Is the world safe? Are people safe? And that's kind of the two things that cause the pain. And so what you're describing in the song is this, you're in a moment, you're online, something happens, and you're feeling pain, you're feeling unloved, or you're feeling insecure. And so you need external things, right? People, COVID, shot or no shot, all these things to validate you, and make you feel loved and safe. And if they don't validate you, if they don't say you're right or I agree with you, then they're saying I don't love you and you're not safe. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, and look, that song is written about the fact that hopefully people get to a point where they go, well, man, we've all been hurt.
Yeah.
And that's, obviously the hook is, can you relate? And the truth is, when we're at our moments of health, the answer should be yes. And that's not to say that we've walked exactly that person's road.
100%.
It's just that, look, man, I've been hurt, so I know what that feels like. And, the other thing I realize is, like, pain is relative, man. I mean, people can go, I've walked through some things in my life and people are like, man, your life has been just so difficult. And I was like, I mean, man, say that to some of the people impoverished in some of these other countries. Right. And man, my life is nothing like that. Yeah. But you still realize that pain is still pain. And people, when you've hit a 10 in your life of pain, it's always going to be a 10 until you've really hit something that is really a 20. Yeah. And then you come back to realizing, man, that other thing I walked through really wasn't as bad as I thought. It's just that I'd never experienced any more pain than that. And so I think the hope is that people listen to the music and they'll say, hey, I get it. I've walked through some things that give me the ability to relate to another as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think what you do with the song is you make people feel seen and heard, right? You're letting them know you're in this together. You're not the only one. And I think Satan, especially, these lies that say you're uniquely broken, right? You're the only person that struggles with this. You're the only one to feel this way. On one hand is shame, and on the other hand turns you into this kind of victim mind state of, oh yeah, I am. I'm the worst, or this happened to me, and I've been so wronged and so wounded that I can't believe it, so I can't pull myself out of it. And so the song does a really good job of fleshing that out and making people, at least for me, feel, oh man, we're all in this. Like, we're all struggling. So any amount of, I tell people all the time, they measure trauma wrong, right? You were saying it earlier. It's like, I was in the Army, and so a lot of times I'll say, oh, well, I wasn't special forces, so like I don't deserve to have PTSD, or I don't, I didn't go on 10 deployments. Well, that's a wrong measurement, right? That's measuring it against worse things. And there are a lot of worse things that have happened to people that haven't happened to me. But there are also a lot of better things that happen to people, right? There are good experiences that people have had that God didn't intend for me to receive that I've received. So we have to find that balance of honoring our experience, and like, it's not the garden, it's not heaven. And so I can be in pain, and like scripture says, the whole earth moans and groans for Christ's return. I can do a little moaning and groaning. However, I need to also have a proper perspective of, like you said, like, is this a 10 or is this just my experience of it? And I think that's where you need relationship and relating to one another, is to
Absolutely.
Go, you have to have other people, community in your life to gauge those things. If you're just stuck, in a closet reading your Bible, hoping God's going to, reveal this thing, he can, but more likely than not, he's going to reveal it in the relationships and have an empathy towards other people. So I love
Absolutely.
that. What other songs are you excited about on the album? What's kind of like a couple favorites that you have?
Yeah, well, obviously, "For God Is With Us" is coming up next. It's a special one just because of the I think during all of this mess, we're coming up on 2 years now, man, where this all started. It's really
Oh,
the
it's
middle of
wild.
March, which is crazy to think through, right? And I think that a lot of people have been asking, the question of, it truly is God with us? And these terrible things are taking place and seemingly not ending. Is God with us? So that song kind of chronicalizes just kind of the proof, if you will, that okay, here's some stories of kind of how it is,
Yeah.
and He's with us. But there's another song on there that's not been released and people won't hear until the album comes out, and it's a song called "Cheering You On." And I'm a big believer in writing songs for better or worse about the things that I'm just personally going through, something that the kids said, what my wife is teaching me.
Yeah.
Those are the things, that's real life. And so I've often said that part of the reason why we take so long in between albums is I'm always saying, you got to live a little bit of life to write about it, or else you're just going to sit there thinking through, well, I'm going to write a song that I think radio is going to want to hear. Or I'm going to write a song that I think that somebody, and anytime you're writing a song, based off of others' opinion, your art very rarely is good. It's gotta come from someplace real. And so anyway, it was probably a year and a bit ago that my oldest son came to me. He's 9 years old. He has this way of saying some very incredibly profound things. And so he was 7 at the time. And he came to me and he said, this is going to sound shocking to people, but he came to me and he said, "Hey, so Dad, you're going to die one day, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, I am going to die." And I explained to him, I said, and I could see that he was a little scared, and I said, "But man, the hope is that it's obviously not for a while. And the hope is that you're going to be older and you're going to have your own family. And so the pain of me dying hopefully won't be the way that you feel it is right now, because I'm kind of, I didn't say it like this, but I'm kind of his everything right now.
Yeah.
Courtney and I, where's everything?" So it's very scary. And so he absorbed all that and he thought about it and he just said, "Well, I'm going to learn everything I can from you, Dad, until that day comes." And I was like, whoa, just this big statement. And so then I sat with that for a bit and I was like, well, what would I tell him? Like what would be the things that, let's say I did die young, what would I leave him with? What would be, so anyway, this song called "Cheering You On" is, the chorus basically talks about, I want you to be gracious at the height of anything that you've done. I want you to be humble, and I want, but at the end of the day, I want you to know that I'm going to be here cheering you on. And it's just a special song for now I'm going to
be crying, especially listening to that. I have a 4 and a 7-year-old son, so I'm in the middle of those conversations too, man. My oldest, he says some just stuff that blows my mind and makes me sit back and go, oh my, especially when you're trying to explain to them death and life and theology and, trying to keep it simple, and they just cut through all of it with truth and just the simplicity of a child, which,
the other day we're praying, and it must have been something over, one of their, not feeling well or something. And one of the kids just said, "Well, I prayed and it didn't work." And I was like, you want to, well, let's course correct, and I was like, that's a real thought. And David thought the exact same thing at times, he's in the Psalm saying, "Hey, I'm praying and you're not close,"
right.
And, they just say some unbelievably powerful and brilliant things. And so that's another song that I it's funny with music, people always want to ask, so is this next album the best you've ever done? I'm like, I have no idea. That's not for me to decide. That's for you guys to decide. But it's my job to write that I think and music that I feel that will be compelling. And the hope is that it will be compelling. But as far as it being the best or this, that, or the other, that's not for me to decide. But I do hope that song will, it'll be something, because at the end of the day, it's always amazing to me when you see someone who's a little older, 65, 70, and their parents are still around. And you look at them by themselves and you're like, man, this person has seen some life.
Yeah.
But when you see them with their parent, you realize, they're a son, they're still a daughter, they're still a son. And it's not until those other folks are not around that they kind of take that mantle. But everybody is a son, everybody's is a daughter, and sometimes we're all looking to be cheered on. And I think that's part of the reason why, spiritually walking through what we walk through is so fascinating, because we're all looking to be loved. We're all looking to be a good kid. Whether or not we're 70, 80 years old, we still want to be good.
Yep.
And so hopefully this song will be, in some cases with maybe parents that are missing for a child, that they can kind of enjoy, in the sense of, man, every parent's dream is to sit back and cheer on their child.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love that. I can't wait to listen to that. It's going to, I mean, again, I'm a huge fan. So the albums that you guys have had and the songs you put out, every one of them to some degree or another has touched me in some way, or talked to me about clients. So just to be an encouragement to you, man, like, y'all stuff matters, and what you're putting out, like, I know y'all get a lot of feedback and you're a popular band, but on the mental health, on the emotional health, on the spiritual health of people, what you're doing matters a huge deal to people, and y'all's vulnerability and what's going on in your life, man, the stuff that, with your kids and the pain that goes on, and then you take that and you put it into lyrics and you hope it's helpful. Just to be an encouragement, it is. And
I appreciate that, man.
It's doing wonderful stuff. And I know that in my own life, where you just pray and you hope that the trauma you're going through, the experiences you're going through, makes sense. I was literally, my earlier session, we were talking about, she's been with me for about 7 years and had just extreme trauma. And we started it kind of initially in the start of my practice, and she's been with me for a while. And so we were talking about the growth the practice has had and all those things. And anyway, I was saying to her, like, but you helped me grow, me working with you and working through your trauma and getting extra trainings to help you has allowed me to now grow and help other people, and to do the podcast and be able to relate and communicate and share my vulnerability and my experience. And so I think, again, that's for our listeners. And I know that's what you guys are doing is, man, our stories are so important, and God is intertwined in our traumas and in ways that, like, we can never know until it comes out.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, man. So
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I was thinking when you were talking earlier about Psalm 103 and how it talks about, God doesn't hold our iniquities against us. And at the end it says, he remembers. Why doesn't he hold these things against us? It's because he remembers where we were formed, that we're dust. Right. And it's
wow. Yeah.
It's like we look at our kids and, like, we love them gracefully because we know they're idiots. They don't have a brain in their head right now. They're just little innocent kids trying to do the best they can, and we can't hold them to some huge standard. And when we do, right, that doesn't go well, and everybody's mad and crying. But it's like, how much more does God look at us as his children that he formed from dirt? And we walk around thinking, oh man, I got these burdens, I got all these things I got to carry, and I've got to do. And yet God's saying, look, son, daughter, like you were saying, I'm cheering you on. Like, I'm encouraging you because I know where you came from. I know what you're capable of, and I love you.
Yeah, that's right. That's cool.
Yeah, man. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about just from a mental health perspective. You guys are, I talked to some bands and have worked in the youth conference circuits and stuff like that. But with all the traveling that you typically do, how do you guys stay healthy with your mental health, with your spiritual health? What are some kind of tips and tricks that you find on the road to be helpful?
Yeah, well, look, if anybody's got the perfect solution, shoot it my way. It's always, I get asked quite a lot. I say, hey, how do you handle work-life balance? And I'm like, guys, I know people have sold millions of copies of books trying to explain this, but, the moment you get too rigid, your life is too rigid. And the moment your life is too loose, your life is too, there's no perfect solution to all of this. But as we all know, there are certain practices in life that do provide fruit, that do provide health. And, I think that stuff is really important. So, look, when we're gone, man, I try to, honestly, the family's a big component to this. I try to bring one of the kids with me basically everywhere.
That's awesome.
I go, and there's a degree of humanity that provides that is very, very helpful for me. There's a lot of other people in my line of work that don't get to do that, and in some cases, don't want to do that. But it helps me, man. I've often said that nobody's designed to hear applause.
Man,
so
that's good.
What are you doing to make sure that you realize that you're you're just we need to be servants, right? And there's nothing more evident in our life than kids, in the sense that, whether or not you want to or not, you have to kind of serve those kids, or else they're going to walk outside without shoes on, and so that's a part of it. Look, we have pretty decent rhythms out in the road of just when I wake up in the morning, we may go get breakfast, but I kind of try and get off the site a little bit. I'll go to a local coffee shop almost every day, because there's a humanity to that as well. When you get to see the people that you're, even just to experience the town a little bit. Obviously, when we go try to read, it's fascinating to me, reading scripture and the disciples asking Jesus, teach me how to pray. And from what I can tell, they asked that question not super early on,
right,
in their journey with Jesus. And so you sit there and you're like, what are you jokers been doing the last, year and a half, but,
yeah,
but what's fascinating to me is I find myself being like one of those stupid disciples where I feel like I'm only really learning how to pray in the last few years.
yep,
And people are like, well, what does that look like? And I read somewhere, that said, if you're trying to learn how to pray, if you're just having conversation with Jesus at all, you're doing better than most.
yeah,
And I thought that was a pretty great indicator of what it means to pray. But obviously being out on the road and actually praying, and my wife years ago challenged me, and she said, hey, sometimes when you pray, you just sound like the Pope, like you're editing your prayers and they're not real. And I was like, you know what? She's right. There's a degree of you want to perform for God, but yet God knows the inner things that are going on in your life. And so to me, learning how to pray has been a huge component to really understanding and feeling, God says that my yoke is easy. Well, when you look at the last couple of years, evidence says it's not that easy, but it can be when you're casting those cares somewhere else. And so I think for me, it's the combination of those things. It is in scripture, it's praying. And I think when I was young in youth group, I felt like those were duties and tasks that I just needed to do. And if I could do them, then I was off to the races. I felt good about myself. And what I'm experiencing now is, in my mid 30s, is the freedom of just being able to not have to sit with the weight of some of these things. If I just pray, if you just simply actually go, man, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about, X, Y, Z. I'm worried about the business. I'm worried about, if we're going to if I'll ever write another good song. I'm worried about, X, Y, Z. It's amazing what happens once you pray those things. You actually you genuinely do feel this. I'm good now. I've verbalized it, and God knows my heart. Those are the things that are what I'm finding to be the most helpful in my, walk with Jesus out on the road and at home. Those are very important components.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate that vulnerability, and I love the humility of, man, taking your kids. And you're right. They when you think we talk about it all the time, like, me being a therapist and my wife, we have a good marriage and we parent, and I'm like, man, we would have thought we were amazing parents if our kids wouldn't have come along. Because they teach you humility and all the things you think you're never going to do, right?
Yeah, I often joke. I was like, why are these people writing parenting books when they haven't even gotten their kids to like the age of 30?
Right.
It's just like a joke to me. It's like, I get it. You may have all of the right knowledge in the world, but man, you try to apply that to your kids. Come back and see me when they're, through college.
Absolutely. That's like sleep training or any of those things. There's like so many sleep books, and I'm like, none of it works.
Man, I tell all these guys that are new parents, I'm like, hey man, you're going to read a book that says, letting your kid cry to sleep, you're just doing all sorts of irreparable damage. And then you're going to have all these other people saying that you should co-sleep. You're going to have all these other people saying that you need to have a schedule from the first day that baby. I mean, dude, God bless you. You just got to figure it out.
That's right, man. Well, look, I appreciate your time. I know it's coming on our time. Any closing comments or thoughts or anything like that? I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're writing, what you're doing, you and your brother and the whole band. And if there's any work or collaboration or help that I can give you guys as a therapist, I know you guys are on the road all the time. If you need somebody in your area, if something's going on with you guys where there's a struggle, man, I want to be a support to the Christian community and those that are out there on mission doing what you're doing. So just know that I'm always open to that. But any closing comments or thoughts?
No, well, not really, man. I think you've done a wonderful job of, taking on a lot of these hard conversations, which I applaud and grateful for. Grateful for, man. At the end of the day, grateful for people in your line of work, man, because people don't want to be sick. People don't want to be tired. People don't want to be traumatized. People don't want to be triggered. But sometimes we got to go do the work and kind of trying to solve some of these things. And so I applaud you for, we used to have someone that lived on our property who was a therapist. And I used to say to her, I was like, I just don't know how you get in the trenches with people every day on such hard things. And she said, Luke, it's an honor and a privilege to journey through life with people that are struggling, and that I get to provide not always the perfect, sounding board, but I get to be a sounding board in their journey. And I always thought, you should be a therapist. That's a pretty healthy way to look at it.
Yeah, man. Well, she's got a good perspective. Well, look, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. Check out their new album, March 11th, for King and Country. Go get that thing and listen to it and let it be some encouragement to you. God bless you and have a good day.